So I had posted something on the Patreon saying something along the lines of how I wanted to add a little bit more of what I like into the channel, and that may be a little bit confusing because most of what I do is just what I like on my channel. But for the past 2 weeks I've been doing editing tutorials. This week was a little bit of a break. For the next 3 weeks I have like kitchen work going on, and so recording has been a little bit difficult with finding the time to do so. Moving on from that, I sort of wanted to put together like a small series that was like pieces of media that I felt had an impact, and so that brings us to the first culprit of that series. And so this is going to be a story of how a simple game about tennis and Sega essentially served to be a transformative experience in my life. Did you see what I did there? Now, as a kid, I was not one of those who was into like sports games. When I had gone to like relatives' houses that had like consoles and that, I would see things like FIFA and Virtua Tennis, and that really didn't do anything for me. I was one of those kids who liked the Inazuma 11, the Galactic Football, and like Sega Soccer Slam, which I don't know if any of those are really connected. I guess I needed something a little bit more in the sport to really get into it. Looking at Sega Superstars Tennis, what was it exactly that brought me to playing this game? Considering I had all these characters that I had never seen before, it wasn't really the characters that were really doing it. For one, I only had experience with, well, Sonic, but this was not the one that really did it for me. I saw a character that I had not seen in quite a long time, and that was II from Monkey Ball. Yeah, I was actually a really big Monkey Ball fan, as I owned the Monkey Ball Deluxe on the Xbox Crystal. Ooh. But the rest of the characters I knew nothing about. Like, let me tell you, this was like a phantom buy. I don't even remember if I was the one who bought this. I think this was just something that my mum bought because it was really cheap at the time. But yeah, looking at the cover, we can see that this game really had a bit of an eclectic cast when it came to Sega characters that I knew nothing about because I was born in '99. So most of these games from like 2002 and before just weren't on my radar because I was baby. Well, saying that, but then I also knew like Gilius from like Golden Axe and Alex Kidd, but that's because my mother was really big into like Sega Mega Drive, so I played some of those. Looking over the roster, actually, like the fully unlocked roster, it was weird looking at all 16 of them and knowing that I only knew 9 out of the 16 characters, which only accounts for like 56% of the actual roster. Like, everyone on here was a little bit of like a wild card pick for me because I was just like, I've never seen these characters before. I have no idea what I'm looking at. But I don't know, there was something about these characters that really drew me to a lot of them. Their designs were really something, and when I was seeing like their arenas and like the music that they came, like the games that they had came from, there was just something that really pushed me towards it. And you know, looking back at it, it's kind of perfect because if I wanted to find out more about like Sega's like more niche games, not everyone had access to do so because I don't remember when this came out, but I know that I did not have internet at the time. We didn't get the internet till like 2010. So literally we're looking at like just Sonic the Hedgehog for me. So why don't we go through some of the franchises exactly of what is included, and we're gonna go through a few of the main ones later on. So literally we're looking at Sonic the Hedgehog, which had 5 characters. Honestly, I'm not gonna really say anything. Everyone knows Sonic. Then you had Super Monkey Ball, which, if I remember correctly, that this actually had gotten, like, Monkey Ball had a Wii game, which was like out during the release. It was like one of the debut games of the Wii, I believe. If anything, I'd say now it's more fun to really watch speedruns of this game because this is kind of insane to watch, like the amount of physics that go into it. It's doing an okay job now because it had the like re-release of like the deluxe thing that they had recently, which had the that guy in it. Then we have Golden Axe, and honestly I wasn't aware how big the influence of Golden Axe was. I had always sort of known of like Streets of Rage and then like Fatal Fury, but I only really knew Golden Axe because it was like one of my mum's favorite like beat 'em up, and it was a game that went from looking like this sometime and then looking like this. And it had a lot of like, it really tried to reach a lot of genres. Like, it had a fighting game, and then it had this like slight comeback in like 2008, which was not well received. Then we have Puyo Puyo, which is a puzzle game series that I started to get into once Puyo Puyo versus Tetris was a thing. And I was not aware of the monumental history behind this game. Like, for the Westerners, we didn't really know it as Puyo Puyo. It was sort of like reskinned to us in like many different ways. but this was a huge game in Japan, and it's like one of the oldest recorded tournament scenes is like that in like 97. It is really interesting to see like how big it was even back then. Then you have Choo Choo Rocket, which I don't really have a lot to say about this one. It looks and sounds cool. It wasn't giving a big impact over me. I know that it was made by Sonic Team and that it was like made to be like a online game for like the Dreamcast, but that is about all I know about this thing. We have Space Harrier, which to this day, I think has one of the best themes in gaming for a game made in its time. And it looked good. Like, I feel like it aged, like the original aged well, mainly because every game afterwards that tried to really replicate what Space Harrier did flopped really hard. And I just mean, come on. We did it once before. How are we struggling to do it again? I feel like just anything after 1 was just terrible. Then Outrun, which I feel like a lot of people know this as like that very simple like driving game. And you know, this definitely was more of like an arcade classic and a game that evolved with the time, with the one in like I think it was like 2002 being pretty decent. But I also feel like, unlike the Japanese like gaming sphere, Outrun just didn't really hold that much influence in the West, because you know, arcades just really started to phase out around this time. And then going like from Outrun, we had Afterburner as well, which was in a similar boat to Outrun, where I think it was really good for the time but slowly fell out of favor with people in the West. Although Climax looks good to this day, it looks better than some games released, I mean, this year. So maybe that's where like the popularity for this franchise came from. Then you had Virtua Squad, which, I mean, who would even know about this at my age at the time? I think I was like 10 or 11. I do remember this because, you know, once I got internet, I started looking up a lot of older games. But I do remember hearing that Virtua Squad was kind of iconic, and that is all I have to say on that. Then we had House of the Dead, which surprisingly is a bit of a meme. Well, it's not really surprising. It started off as an arcade shooter and then was ported onto home consoles. But it was mainly made popular on the internet by like the awful voice acting.
I've been waiting for you, friends.
Goldman! Do you know what you're doing?
I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. Can't you see?
I don't know why, but for some reason people were very entertained by the keyboard training game, the Typing of the Dead. These main ones didn't really take off in terms of popularity, and so you may ask, how did this change my life exactly? And well, it's a very specific bunch that I have not mentioned. So I'd say first up with a game that had the least impact over me was Samba de Amigo. And honestly, when I first played on this stage and Samba de Janeiro was playing, I'd never heard this song before. And I was like, oh, hold on. Like, the choices that they picked were very good. I wasn't really aware that it was a rhythm game at the time. And I'm not going to say that my music tastes were exactly changed by the introduction of more Latin music, but it did help me appreciate a lot more because I just never heard a lot of these. And it's funny because this had a lot of tie-ins to DDR, and you've seen my channel, you know how much I really enjoy DDR altogether. And I think the main thing that really pushed me towards Amigo, mainly as a character, was just like I was really interested in just like the design. I thought it was just really cool and different to like the stuff that I was seeing at the time. And hey, on that topic, this is another franchise that has made an appearance. Now, this is definitely a game that is lost on people. This game is an experience. When I first saw Ulala, I was like, okay, I am feeling this like very retro space groove sort of aesthetic, and I was absolutely here for it. The music for the stage on like, say, Superstars Tennis, I don't even know what to call it. It was like disco and very like future groove sound. It was like what older people thought space would sound like, but if it was like fun. And yeah, I loved it. Space Channel 5 is an experience visually, and the gameplay is akin to that of like Rhythmic Simon Says, of where you follow and press the same action as the enemies and like in time with the music. Also, and you may have seen that she also had a VR game that came out not too long ago, which was essentially just part 1 without all the content. And from what I saw, it needed way more content. I think it was more of a test to see if like people were ready for like a reboot. The next up was Knights. And honestly, when I saw Knights, I was like, I couldn't really put my mind on it, but I really liked their design. And I couldn't really put my finger on what it is that I liked about it. And then one day I went over to a local store and I saw Journey of Dreams. It's definitely a very interesting and it has a very interesting story behind it. And I am also aware that the gameplay is just not for everyone. It's simple, it's a little repetitive, but it looks good. I think the people who know me know nothing about how much I have spoken about this game, and I don't think anyone on my channel may have an idea of how much I enjoyed this game either. That's right, it is Jet Set Radio. If you saw anything from like my Bum Rush videos, which was heavily inspired by everyone's favorite gaming soundtrack, Jet Set Radio, I really loved the vibes and the designs and the style. Like I said before, because I didn't have the internet to really look up these new franchises, and so I asked my mum, who was the only one who had the internet because she had a BlackBerry, and so she would look up this game for me, and we ended up finding Jet Set Radio Future on the Xbox, where I then proceeded to talk about this game for a very long time because she showed me like a small YouTube video of it, and I was like, yep, I need this right now. And she wouldn't get me the original because it was on the Dreamcast, and she refused to get me a console that was that old. But we found Jet Set Radio Future, and I need them to re-release it for Steam. And not to mention, there was that whole demo reel that came out with like the Persona 3 thing that showed that there had been some development on something Jet Set Radio related. And yeah, that's essentially how a really silly game just about Sega and tennis has now, like, I literally own games from most of these franchises. Well, the main franchise that I've spoken about now, and then Puyo. I really don't know what I want to do for this sort of series with the editing video, because technically nothing came out last week. I'm probably going to do this and then see if I can get that recorded, because the next video is supposed to be about audio and how to make your videos look more professional. If you want to support me, we have a Patreon. Yeah,